It's a massive shock that the UK economy, which was once a beacon of stability, now faces terrible challenges. And recently, headlines have succeeded in capturing these problems. All over the news, you'd see something like Britain, the poor man of Northwest Europe, or the sick man of Europe, and so on. Unfortunately, these aren't mere exaggerations of a stark reality. This is because post-pandemic, the UK's economic recovery has been, well, unpleasant, especially when compared to its European counterparts. Also, growth has remained sluggish while inflation soars, and this combination, known as stagflation, threatens the nation's prosperity now and in the long term. Now, Brexit, which is far from delivering its promised benefits, has instead created a bureaucratic maze. Companies seeking stability and access to larger markets are now relocating to the Gulf or Europe. Interestingly, this exodus of businesses and talent has further weakened the UK's economy. Yet what is most disturbing is the nation's reluctance to acknowledge and confront these issues head-on. What the UK probably doesn't know is that the path forward requires honest assessment and bold action, and that improving trade relationships, investing in education and infrastructure, and fostering innovation are crucial steps. Without these, the UK risks falling further behind its peers and making more distressing headlines. No doubt the stakes are high, and aside that, a thriving economy isn't just about numbers, it's about opportunities, living standards, and the nation's global standing, all of which are failing in the UK. So the question is, what is wrong with the economy of the UK? And how did it deteriorate this much? Currently, the UK faces some crises that have made living unbearable. Issues like homelessness, rising costs, and so on. Homelessness is a big problem affecting hundreds of thousands of people across the UK, and in recent times, the numbers have only been increasing. Yet, the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis in the UK has only made more people homeless. This is quite unfortunate because the UK is a major world economy. Interestingly, some leaders have pledged to end homelessness in the UK. For example, London Mayor Sadiq Khan promised to end rough sleeping in the city by 2030 before his next election. But before anyone can solve a problem, you must first learn its scale. This is why it is important that you know the facts and figures about homelessness. In 2023, it was established that a whopping sum of 3,898 people slept rough across England on a single night. Now, this snapshot is way more than those counted in 2022, or even over 2 times the 1,768 people on the streets in 2010. Also, most of the people sleeping rough in England are men of 26 years and above. And according to the London-only Combined Homelessness and Information Network, chain, the most recent snapshot showed 10,053 rough sleepers spotted on the streets of London between April 2022 and March 2023. Also, a total of 4,118 people were detected between January and March 2024, for the most recent quarterly update, revealing a rise of 1/3 in just a year. With all of that said, there is no running away from the difficulties of the recent news for the Prime Minister and Chancellor, both in the political aspects and economically. To take the political first, the UK's now ex-Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, swore that he would grow the economy. In fact, he staked his reputation on it. Now, while the economy just about grew in 2023, it had the most anemic growth imaginable, 0.1%. That is by far the worst year for improvement since the 2009 crash. And in another sense, the economy didn't improve at all. Also, when experts want to understand how growth really is across the economy, they don't just consider GDP, but GDP per capita. This is necessary in a country with notable immigration flows, and gives a better scale of economic progress or decline in the case of the UK. And according to estimates, GDP per capita collapsed by 0.7% in 2023. Not only that, it has dropped every quarter since Q2 in 2022, which is the longest unbroken streak of shrinking GDP per head since comparable records came to be in 1955. While the UK and recession have no doubt become synonymous, the living conditions associated with it have proved to be more important. This brings us to the scary question: what's really going on in the UK, and why has the economy been shrinking? Well, there are plenty of reasonable explanations. While some will accuse Brexit, which has gummed up the wheels of trade, others will blame the Bank of England, which has not failed in increasing interest rates to unbelievable levels, affecting households and their spending. But since 2022, there has also been a war between Russia and Ukraine, and since the invasion began, gas prices have reached record levels across Europe. Energy costs skyrocketed, and since the UK, like its European neighbours, is a major energy consumer, and since its price is fixed in almost every product, from tomatoes to paper to electronic gadgets, the country has taken a huge financial turn. The UK has gotten poorer than it was before, and that's one of the main explanations for its weak GDP. But it's worth noting that most of the other major energy importers like Japan have faced the same crisis and seen the same order of weak GDP figures. So in essence, Britain is clearly not alone. All the same, this reality is terrible, especially for the politicians who hope to go for re-election. Having identified all these problems, the future of the UK becomes very questionable. From the recent forecasts and predictions, the UK economy is expected to grow consistently year by year until the end of 2026. But unfortunately, this growth may be slow. While 2023 ended with a technical recession, especially for the third and fourth quarters, projections for growth for 2024 and 2025 have gone up and up, slightly to 0.5 and even 0.7, with 2026 alone set to experience a whole 1.0% growth. But overall, the growth profile is still moderate, with interest rates reducing gradually and a weak recovery in the level of consumer spending playing the role of the primary mover for any GDP growth. And even though the Consumer Price Index (CPI) rate of inflation has improved faster than expected, the core inflation remains over the roof. Yet, it is expected that the general decreasing trend would continue, with the CPI staying just above the Bank of England's 2% objective at 2.3% in 2024, 2.1% in 2025, and 2.2% in 2026. Now, let's see if there's any hope for progress. After the Office for National Statistics reviewed the growth for 2023, growth in the third quarter of that year was revised down into negative territory, with the fourth quarter also showing a decrease. This made the overall growth for that year sit at 0.1%. Also, even though 2024 started off a little slower than expected, there should be enough growth to make the progress match up with projections. Generally, the projection for 2024 is now 0.5%, while that of 2025 has now become 0.7%, which is an increase of 0.1%. But with the global economic crisis, the interest rates that have been falling steadily, and the new and gradual increase in consumer spending, experts expect the economy to still thrive and finally hit 1.0% in 2026. In spite of this, the economy seems very vulnerable. More so, it has been noticed that even though disposable incomes have risen above pre-pandemic levels, consumers are still spending less than they were in 2019. Other factors that could dampen the outlook of the nation's economy include the historically higher interest rates, which could weigh heavily on investment in house building and home improvements, and even government expenditure declining for the next couple of years. In addition, trade is expected to continue to have an impact on the economy due to weakening global demand, further trade barriers with the European Union, and contentions in Europe and the Middle East. Additionally, exports have been projected to fall by 1.3% in 2024, before rising by 1.1% and 1.7% in 2025 and 2026 respectively. But imports are expected to be more terrible, because a relatively weak economy would restrict growth. In essence, with both the inflation and interest rates crumbling, it is still expected that business investment rates will increase over the next couple of years, even if it is stunted. Clearly, a lot of things are wrong with the UK economy, but with the right policies and strategies, the prospects can be better. As it stands, all attention is on the 2024 elections, which is the biggest news and the latest best thing in the UK. Because after all the failed promises, Rishi Sunak lost the election in what has been described as a historic general election after a whopping 14-year rule by the Conservative Party. In fact, headlines read that Britons have handed Keir Starmer's Labour Party nearly 2/3 of the seats in the UK Parliament's House of Commons. But controversies exist on who really won the election. Given the number of seats it won, no one can dispute Labour's win. It no doubt made history in so many ways, from the party's candidate Tony Vaughan taking over Folkestone and Hythe from the Tories, the first time since 1950, to gaining control of Westminster and London for the first time. In spite of the obvious feat, there are still some confusions. First, the party received 34% of the total vote, even though it had 64% of the seats. Then, voters turned out to be only around 60% of the total, which is a fall from the 67% turnout in 2019. Now, this is the second lowest voter turnout in history, since 1885, and in a lot of ways, it looks more like an election the Conservatives have lost than one Labour has won. Yet, the prospects are great. This is because the party is committed to making some essential reforms to improve the economy. Concerning pensions, the party is pledged to keep the triple lock, and so pensioners should expect a yearly increase in the state pension. Additionally, even though the lifetime allowance (LTA) has been eliminated, Labour has promised to enforce it. And although many believe that Labour would find it challenging to reinstate the LTA due to the technological difficulties, yet a lot more believe it is possible. Interestingly, the Labour Party has also mentioned plans to simplify individual savings account (ISA) to make it as easy as possible for people to invest, even though the process isn't clear yet. Also, the Lifetime Individual Savings Account (LISA) would most likely be reformed under the Labour government, which is something industry experts have been fighting for a long time now. This is because LISAs usually impose a 25% tax levy on investors who need to take out funds for purposes aside from retirement or the purchase of a property. And it is usually a higher amount than the original government bonus given to investors, making finances more difficult for people. Now, while all of these sound great, they are only prospects, and we can only wish that our hopes are not dashed like the last administration. What do you think about the election results? And will the UK rise again? If you enjoyed this video, do give a thumbs up. Also, do subscribe to this channel if you haven't. See you in the comments.